Hello, I'm David Bradley, and this is from The Mind of a Mystic, and today is the first episode of the first podcast, and today we got the lovely Sascha Cooper here.
Hello, David.
Hello. So the basic, to give a bit of a brief rundown, to do it slightly differently from our failed take, I am looking to analyse, because basically I have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and I'm looking to analyse alternative explanations for the phenomena I experience within my schizophrenia, because more or less there's a great quantity of things that I experience that I don't think can simply be written off as mental health issues, and in fact some of the people I've worked with in mental health have suggested just the same. So part of this is part of my recovery process, part of my own process, but also hopefully entertaining. So we've got Sascha here today, and would you like to give us a brief sort of description of your career or your job or what it is?
Certainly, of course I can, David. So, hi everybody. My gosh, the first podcast. First thing. Anyway, very excited to be here. So, I'm Sascha, and I live in Brighton, and I'm what's known as a creative entrepreneur and an holistic, insightful life coach. So basically, an entrepreneur does all sorts of different things. My sort of roles are an actress, a dancer, psychic medium and reader, and I'm also a hair and makeup artist, BBC qualified and trained, and I'm also a holistic, insightful life coach. Plus I run my own theatre company as well, in which I write and direct for. So I'm here today because obviously this is focusing on the mystical side of things, and hopefully I can bring my own mediumship and psychic experiences plus my coaching experience to this particular podcast.
Sure. So yeah, I've got a few questions lined up, and we've got a rough, vague thing, but I've specifically brought you here in the capacity in relation to the psychic mediumship.
Yeah.
Because it's something that I've experienced as a sort of matter. That's a loud noise, isn't it? It's a matter of personal experience that the majority of the things that give me my diagnosis as a schizophrenic is basically psychic phenomena.
Right.
So I guess the first thing I wanted to mention myself was this thing we talked about a little bit beforehand,
Yeah.
which was the thought broadcasting and telepathy in itself. So they do choose their moments.
Yeah, for edit, loud noise.
I'll do some noise cancellation, it'll be fine. So thought broadcasting basically is a psychological term for the experience of projecting out and receiving inwards other people's thoughts.
Yeah.
Basically, that's my direct experience, as well as the experience which is commonly held with quite a few different people with schizophrenia, and it's a common occurrence. And I just wondered if you had any insight into that straight off the bat, like how would you term these experiences that I have with thought broadcasting, and is there any, and feel free to ask any questions that you have so I can help.
Certainly, of course.
Sure.
I mean, certainly from my own direct experience, the thought broadcasts that you describe, they're very similar to when I receive messages, as if I'm working in a mediumship capacity.
Sure.
So, really and truly, what we're working with here is, I mean, obviously for many people it's different, but for me personally, I tend to find, even as I'm speaking now, the way I tend to get things like this is it's almost like a shiver down my spine. So I work as a clairsentient, which basically means I pick up emotions and energy. So I don't see or hear spirit per se, but I know when it's around me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So occasionally, if I'm giving a reading or if I'm doing a demonstration,
Sure.
what I'll get is almost a similar crossover to a thought process. I think you were saying to me as well that you sometimes see these figures.
I get visions, and it's almost like a whole sensory input. It's like auditory, so
Yeah.
I'll hear them speaking, I'll see them there, I'll feel their presence.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's even a scent or a correlating kind of an emotional resonance, I guess you would say. Like
Yes.
you feel what they're feeling as well, as though you're with a normal person.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, let's put it this way. for myself, I know exactly what you're saying, because occasionally, whether psychologists or anything else like that will call it more like a suggestion, it's more, if you're really tuned in, so to speak, you do occasionally, and I get the odd whiff of a bit of perfume or a little bit of tobacco, and sometimes that's all the person needs as a clue to who that person is. It could even just be a sense of something they used to say or something along those lines.
Or like a phraseology that comes up quite often. It's like there'll be like I get it when I occasionally do tarot readings, which I'm probably structured entirely different from traditional tarot readings, but it's still the same method, but I sort of frame it differently.
Yeah.
I definitely get this sense of like people carry a version of someone within them, but they may not be aware of it. And you can kind of draw that character out and then reflect back to them what they're saying, and then you get this sense of like, oh, you're talking like that person. You know what I mean? I definitely experienced that. Yeah,
that's exactly like clairsentiency, and it's a similar thing that happens with me. So in this instance, I'll pick up something like an emotion or a message that person needs to get across to the individual, or even just as a general message to the entire room. But it is like almost like the energy moves through my body, and depending on where the emphasis is, sometimes I'll get the sensation straight from the heart chakra. Now, this is where I tend to do a lot of my work, because if I'm drawn towards that heart chakra, it immediately tells me somebody's working very strongly from it at the moment, or there's a lot of mixed stuff going on, depending on how intense it is. But sometimes I'll get it on different parts of my body. So say, for instance, I can usually tell if somebody's had a stroke, say, for instance, if one side of my arm goes completely dead. And it will do that for no reason whatsoever. I know
that must be quite unnerving to experience.
Can be, but
or at least initially.
Initially, yeah. I mean, but because I've been doing this for quite a while, you do learn coping tactics with it. But I'll know if I can't lift my arm, say, for instance, or maybe if there's a huge tension in my shoulders or in my back, or I've even gotten down here in the stomach area as well. So sometimes I can pick up where somebody is holding that energy. But it is like you say, sometimes, depending on whom I'm reading for, I'll do what's called a trance mediumship. So in this instance, I just let the spirit do the talking for me. So I'll give myself over to spirit, I'll let them speak through me.
Sure.
Basically.
The way I relate to that massively is, so the trance state in particular is something that I experience spontaneously. I get a kind of dissociation from my character. I'm able to shift the focus of myself and sort of, I would describe it as moving into the back seat of my consciousness.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And then I find that it may be an aspect of me, it may be an aspect of the environment or the person, usually the person I'm talking to.
Yeah.
But I'll be able to bring down through me the kind of the information they need at the time, and it may not always be 1,000% accurate, but it's my experience that if I just disconnect and let that thing talk, then quite often it's usually very accurate.
Indeed, and you can usually...
I refer to it as like sort of channeling. Or
channeling, We use that term as well in the industry, when we channel a spirit. Now, in my case, obviously I'm not going to mention any names, but I have one particular client whom I particularly use trance mediumship for, just because she can handle it. The majority of...
suits her.
Yeah, exactly. The majority of people I do read for, however, they're more... Well, if I was to do trance mediumship on them, they couldn't handle it.
Sure. It's quite unnerving in my own experience of it. Like people... there's this sense that the person thinks that you possess information about them, if you see what I mean. Like, because it's so accurate and pinpoint and on the nail, and what it is you're talking about resonates with them so much, they think that you're almost hot reading.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I'll go into the situation that I don't know anything. I'm just saying what's coming out of my mouth. I very little control over it. and it gives the appearance of you've gone and researched something, when in actuality I've just turned up and spoken to the person, and they're like, how do you know this? And it's like,
Yeah.
I get that information from you, from the world, from this. Do you know what I mean?
You are open, in other words.
Yeah.
It's what we call being open to receive.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
is that like the label? Yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
in layman's terms, it's when a medium or a reader or both, in most instances, is open to receive.
Sure.
But we can usually tell when we're open whether somebody is so closed off they're ready to test you, or they're not ready to receive, or they are so open that the information will go bang, 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 bang.
And it's hard to follow the thread almost.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and it just goes bang, 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 bang. So, again, the experience had there, you could almost say that you have to be prepared for anything in the industry, and it sounds like what you're describing is very, very similar.
Yeah, it's occurred to me spontaneously, I guess.
Yeah.
That through just matter of course, I've been exposed to these things, and then I know some of the terminology because of research, where I've gone like, what is this thing? Like, this is happening to me, and then some psychical stuff, some psychological stuff, some spiritual stuff, even hypnosis and things like that. I've looked into forms of hypnosis, and I found that acts in a kind of self-oriented, I don't know, yeah, I just researched so many different topics to try and find rational explanations, and most of the rational ones, or the non-intuitive ones, tend to fall short of like the actual like description and knowledge of the information, which is partly why I'm so intrigued to meet you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. However, talking about rationality, I used to work with a paranormal investigator who sadly passed away
God bless you.
earlier this year.
God bless you.
And he always used to say this one thing, right? Because he was a fledgling medium himself. His name was Adrian J. Andrews. He used to do the ghost walks in Kemp Town.
Oh, really? Okay.
Mhm,
Yeah. I'm aware of them. I used to live in Kemp Town, so I'm aware of
okay.
the walks. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're aware of what he did. Now, he passed away earlier this year.
Okay.
And what happened was that when we worked together, I feel like he's here actually at the moment. Yeah, he's just smiling. Basically, he always used to say in any of the demonstrations that we did or we gave, whether it was
Is he off just there?
Pardon?
Is it like there? Sort of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right behind me. You've got it in one, just here.
Yeah.
But put it this way, he always used to say, always approach any kind of psychic phenomena with a form of healthy skepticism.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason why he said that is because you could easily go to, say, a ghost hunt or go to a reader and be conned, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you have a healthy balance with it,
Yeah.
then it's fine.
This goes back to sort of what I was saying earlier about my cognitive dissonance approach.
That's right.
Basically holding two opposing ideas and then formulating my opinion based on the crossover,
Yeah.
I guess. That's kind of how I navigate my experiences, because like I've had some pretty horrific experiences, like demonic stuff that have been really entirely unpleasant. I've also had some profoundly angelic visionary states and connected with the most interesting one was I was laid in bed one night trying to sleep, and I was really stressed and aggravated, and this kind of, it was like a light body, like literally as you would imagine, like a body of light, but in the shape of a whale, but with arms. And it was really bizarre, but it came from the ocean, and it came down and it reorganized all the kind of misplacements in my body, and it left me with this glow for months afterwards, and it was just this weird sea creature thing in the room that came down and kind of just cleansed, and just, it was almost like it just like went, get rid of that bit, that's rubbish, and then just put that there, and then just sit in that emotion. It was quite a powerful experience, and I've had a number of those kind of things. But to be able to survive those, I need to, because I'm engaged with mental health services, I need to be able to rationally explain it to other people so that I don't risk incarceration. So I'm big on psychological terminology and alternate frameworks for bizarre experiences
Yeah.
as well.
Okay.
Which is a big part of why I want to do this, because I've looked into that side enough, but I need to look into the other side more, because that side's leaving me wanting, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah.
And you know, it's again, you know, if we follow along the same sort of lines here in terms of rationality, you know, the healthy skepticism attitude is always a good one to have as a whole, because what I found personally, and this is where I've got to thank Andrew in many respects. So Andrew, yes, if you are around, yes, I've got you to thank, because what he taught me, coming from his perspective, because he was also a fledgling medium, but he came from the psychological as well.
Sure, yeah.
And what he always said was, he taught me the fact that you've got to keep, even as a medium, you've got to keep everything in check.
Sure.
Because,
especially, actually.
yeah, especially if you are working through something like a mental health issue, for instance, like depression.
Yeah,
You know?
I had I think I was 14 or 15, I got diagnosed with severe clinical depression. And that only stopped at 20 when I developed my psychosis, and they put me on the antipsychotics, and that overnight cured the depression. It was interesting.
Just out of curiosity,
Sure.
when you went on these pills, did they shut off a part that allows you to be psychic?
My experience is that they shut down primarily my memory of my psychic experiences. So, like, say when they wear off in the evening, I have recurrent memories and latent memories of these altered realities I've been to, and all these things come in. But the meds kind of restrict my memory. So I'm aware of it. I've written it down. I make records of it. I'm conscious of it. But the vividness of those memories is completely reduced.
Right.
And that's a big thing that helps me cope, because it's like I've been to, as far as I'm concerned, I've been to hell. I've been to heaven. I've been to purgatory. I've been in so many different states of consciousness that exist within this world, but without it. Like, you can kind of experience other realities, and I've done intense dream travel and kind of lucid dreaming, astral projection, a lot of things like that. And again, these are all things I've just sort of picked up along the way of being exposed to them and then finding terminology for them. But yeah, it's very much a case of, like, if I live as a full embodiment of that kind of weird god that I am in those other states, or that kind of deity-connected being, I can't function normally. And that's why I accept the schizophrenia diagnosis, because it gives me the framework for denying those experiences healthily.
Okay.
Or at least a methodology for restricting them.
Right. Okay. So I get where you're coming from there.
Sure.
In this context.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I put another slide here?
That's why you're here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because what you're describing is, again, something I come across a lot when I'm reading clients. Because I'll be honest with you, the majority of the clients who come to somebody like a medium or a psychic, they want an alternative to psychologists or therapists. Because what they want is something that maybe the professional in question they've gone to can't handle, or they've been on pills or something like that. And in fact, that's the main reason why Adrian never wanted to go on to certain types of tablets, because he didn't want that shut off. Because he suffered from depression as well.
To be honest, I didn't want it shut off.
No.
I sectioned myself because I was concerned about the experiences I was having. So I had the insight to know this may not be real, and if it is, it's terrifying. So I asked for help. And they were like, well, you take this, or we pin you down and make you take it.
Right.
That was my approach to it, and I accepted it, and it's proved useful in functioning and maintaining a normal life.
Okay.
But at the same time, like, I was in heaven at the time, but I couldn't reconcile the experiences I was having with my sort of the stereotypical left brain, the rational side of myself. I couldn't go like, okay, so I'm a telepath, I'm a deity, I'm experiencing incredible power, and I don't know what to do with it, and still think that I'm a human being and be rational and have all my memories and functional self. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
So it's like running away from power, basically.
Yeah, we get that a lot as well in the industry. We really do. And the fact is, what you're dealing with here is a very, very thin line from the whole aspect of just seeing what's real and what's not. And this is where I can really relate here, because when I first started the whole path when I was 18, the fear at the time was, what the hell am I dealing with?
Yeah.
You know, because I'll be honest, I only did it at 18 to raise money for my school.
Oh, bless.
Yeah, I only did it because I tapped into the actress side of things. And it's a true story. Basically, did one gig, and say the tent's here. Basically, at the time, in Devon, where I was living, if the tent's here, I had all my makeshift stuff going on here. The queue started from here and goes all the way through your house, right round to Old Steen.
Wow. Okay.
That's how long the queue was.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Right? So it took off from there, and I found out because of my family saying, right, shall we test this out, see if this is a fluke? I went round several fates. Same thing kept happening. Year later, at 19, when I went back, I read to this lady who was the spitting image of Susie from Susie and the Banshees. You know, Susie Sue. And I remember that, that when you describe that state between heaven, hell, purgatory, I don't know what it was I went into, but I remember my body shutting down at the time as I was reading her. And all I remember is this voice. I actually, this is one of the very rare times I have heard a voice. Literally, this person just kept saying, look, don't shut me out. No, please, don't shut me out. Don't shut me out. Just tell her I'm okay.
Oh, bless.
That's all I remember. Yeah. And I remember vaguely coming to, really shaken.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what the hell just happened there?
Yeah.
She's crying. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what the hell have I done? Yeah, exactly. What the hell have I done? I even offered my £1 back to her, because I was only charging £1 at the time. And she goes, no. What happened there was you channeled the spirit of my dead fiancé, who passed away exactly 3 months to the day from cancer.
Oh, shit. Wow.
And I was like, what? And apparently I'd gotten his mannerisms spot on, certain things he was saying, but I don't remember any of it. So that was my first, what I know now is an experience of trance mediumship, but it was literally like I'd gone way up here somewhere, and I couldn't describe it. Came out the tent, I told Mum what had happened, she went white as a sheet, and that's when the bombshell was dropped onto me. Love you, Mum, by the way, if you're watching. But she basically said, look, my Mum's side of the family are Romani Gypsy descent. You have a, I'm not even sure if it's a gift.
Lineage. Yeah.
She actually said to me, I'm not sure if it's a gift, but we are basically psychics.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, what?
Yeah.
But do you know, the strange thing was, at the time, we were talking about heaven and hell, I remember thinking, the first thought, but I'm a Christian. I can't be a medium.
I went through that and still go through that, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know the struggle as well.
Yeah.
But to cut a long story short, there have been so many experiences during my journey as a medium and a psychic where you do go into that state. And I can safely say, if I go back to my particular client that I do trance mediumship with, the state that you recognise, I've now come to know it for myself. It could be something different for somebody else, but for me, it's what I call in limbo.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you go to in limbo, yes, you get the messages from spirit, but you also, it's pretty much like, I think the best way to describe it's almost like a waiting list. It's like a waiting room, and you're waiting for whatever it is your purpose is. So there's also a heaven. I do believe there is a heaven.
Yeah.
But what I do know is that, certainly coming from a coaching perspective here as well, we're actually in hell right now.
That's such a reassuring thing to hear, because that's my genuine perception.
Yeah.
This is one of the hells, basically.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is again something coming from a coach perspective.
Oh, it lifted my heart when you said that. Sorry, go on.
Oh, is that you what?
It lifted my heart a little
Oh,
bit when you said that.
I thought something had shifted. So you're like, there you go.
But now we can really talk. Like,
like that. No, but coming from a coaching perspective here, as well as a medium side.
Sure.
Yes, this is hell we are living in, but it's how we live our lives that determine whether we are living in a hell or heaven.
Yeah.
And
I have a song called "Hell's What You Make It." Let's make our hell home.
There you go.
Make it a home. Yeah.
There you go. And I've always been of the belief, you know, and I know several people will say the same thing. Doesn't matter which path you follow. I mean, nowadays I'm a Christ pagan, which means I combine Christianity and paganism, which was why I'm able to do my readings.
Christianity actually did.
Exactly, yes, you got it, if we're talking historically. But as far as we're concerned, as far as I'm concerned, as long as you live a good life, you don't deliberately harm anybody, if you live a good life, then that's all that matters.
Harm none, sort of thing.
Exactly. Or in the Wiccan Read it says, "And it harm none, do which you will." Or you've got the 10 Commandments there in the Bible as well. It's a similar sort of thing. The only difference being, if you are, and this is something, again, the coaching aspect can bring in here again, same here with psychic stuff, it'll tell you exactly the same thing. As long as you, however, take responsibility for your actions.
Yeah, I dig that.
Then
Definitely.
You take responsibility, but not entirely for everything, but the ones that you contributed to, or you started.
Take ownership of it.
Yeah, take ownership, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with the gift. And this is the main problem that I've personally been up against on my early part of the journey, when I was trying to work out exactly where on earth I would be on that spiritual path. So I toyed with becoming fully Wiccan, but something didn't want to draw me away from Christ. Yeah. But I also didn't.
A powerful figure.
Exactly. I didn't want to be away from how I'd been brought up.
Sure.
If you see what I mean.
And there's a lot of value, in my experience, there's a lot of value to that framework as well, because it holds power with people. Like even that term hell, like that's what I genuinely perceive this reality to fundamentally be. And when I went into my supposed psychosis, that was my revelation.
Yeah.
And I was actualized fully as this was hell. Like my experience was directly that it was a playground for suffering, effectively. It's hard to think about without becoming disconcerted, but it is my genuine experience of reality, and I also know that my experience of the state of Christ consciousness, which I believe I've entered into, which for me is a kind of electrostatic void in which you lose all bodily and sensory data.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a plane going over.
Yeah, plane.
And I've gone into that state on a number of occasions, and it's as though there is electro-digital, I'll speak closer to the mic, electro-digital sort of void in which you can enter. I'll just wait for the plane.
Yeah, wait for plane. Edit. This is edit mode.
Oh, it's fine. I'll leave it in. It adds character.
Oh, why not? Why not? Plus, if you think about it, it's Spirit having a laugh with us. Thanks, guys.
It did feel like a bit of a mockery.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Seriously.
It's funny though.
No.
But yeah, so I've entered on an incalculable number of occasions the state I call Christ consciousness. And I call it the liquid digital fire. It's as though everything that you normally experience as the world disappears, and you're just left in your mind. and it's a kind of living, vibrant space. It looks digital, and there's kind of like there's manifestations of idea there. It's like, almost like an astral realm, but it's a void at the same time, but it's a living, breathing void.
That's very true.
In which I experience the neighbour's cat there. I experience a real deep sense of bliss and serenity, and there's real information there. Almost like how people describe like the Akashic record or the collective unconscious. They kind of it's like a living, breathing, electro-digital space where there is only pure consciousness or the pure mind on its own, and it's
when you strip everything away.
When there's nothing left of yourself, like when you submit basically to divinity. That is my experience of it. Then you enter that state. Yeah.
Now we're getting into interesting territory here.
Indeed.
Because one thing that I do know, and I, again, it's had a variety of things on others, but for me personally, what I've gone through, and I know what a few others have gone through, is the acceptance. And I've always believed, especially as a Christo-pagan now, if you strip away everything that is political about religion, spirituality.
Like, it's everything that's dual.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, really, you strip everything away to its absolute basic level, what you have is something quite magical. Yeah. And that's really the whole thing with getting the balance right. So even, getting back to what you were saying about the whole rational left-hand side of the brain versus the creative right-hand side of the brain, if we bring psychology back into it again, it's the same thing in spiritual coaching or holistic life coaching in this instance, because it's about balance. It's about making sure that you are approaching things in a certain way. As long as you've got the good intentions behind all that you're doing, then, and we're not necessarily aware, but you are in a heightened state about the possible outcomes that each choice brings.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Then actually what you get is something that is a lot more down to earth, pure, as you were saying.
It's quite nuanced as well. Like,
you got it.
It's not just good and evil or black and white or right and wrong. There is nuance to everything, and it's a very difficult thing to sense your way through.
Yeah. However, I do think in some situations it's deliberately a black and white setup, good versus evil, black versus white.
Yeah.
Certainly for morality situations.
Oh yeah.
But
there are things that are objectively wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
And objectively right as well.
That's right.
But then they only exist in correlation to each other.
Yeah.
If everything was just neutral, there would, in my opinion, there would be no universe.
Yeah.
There would be no existence. There would be no movement. There'd be no motion to the universe. There'd be nothing.
Yeah. Or to quote the Joker from Batman, chaos will reign.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and that's another thing as well. You do. Okay, I know we're going slightly off topic here.
I don't mind.
But it is relevant though. In relation. Hello.
What on earth is that?
Whatever it is. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you see, this is why I love stuff like this, ladies and gents, because anything can happen in this scenario. Anyway,
right.
No, but the whole thing is, if we're talking about this neutral space, psychology, spirituality, insightfulness, holistic approaches, you could, in many ways, in fact, somebody, I can't remember the author now, but they've written a book that's actually called Batman and Psychology. And what happens is, I know you can find it on Audible and all those kinds of places at the moment, but it's interesting because in relation to what we're talking about, what it does is it highlights certain actions and aspects that the comics bring that you could actually relate to psychology. And funnily enough, as we're speaking, I'm reminded of the Joker and the Scarecrow. Now, the Joker, if we're talking about this whole space, the universe, if there were no rules and regulations, he's a bit like the Fool in the Tarot.
Yeah.
You know, he has no restriction. He has no boundaries, no nothing.
Unlimited power, but very little way to channel it.
You got it.
Yeah.
And, you know, it is a bit like the universe. If there isn't a structure in place,
Sure. Yeah.
per se, it's the same if we're talking about this version of hell. If we make it a hell, that is.
Yeah.
If we make it a hell.
Sure.
We could easily make it a heaven if we choose to. But the thing is, the Joker represents, in much rather like the Fool and the Tarot, that unlimited chaos if it's not reined in. Yes, on one side it represents the freedom that we choose, and that's the beauty of the universe. It encourages freedom. But if we don't have those boundaries in place...
Yeah, like a system of morality, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, a system of... That's what... I remember in one of the Batman films, the Christopher Nolan ones, he was saying, like, the thing that makes you weak is that you have a boundary, you won't kill people.
That's right.
You know,
That's
you know
right.
what I mean? Like
I know
that system
exactly
of,
that
like,
conversation.
Yeah.
It was, if I remember correctly, between the Joker and Batman, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was that conversation, and that's so true, actually, based on what we're talking about.
And that, yeah, because like something I wanted to touch on, I don't know how comfortable the subject it will be, but one of my recurrent deities that I think we mentioned before we started filming that I interact with various deities through thought broadcasting, and I recently entered into a very real visceral hell again.
Yeah.
An unfiltered state, and I realised something quite reassuring, that a chain of memories came back of like every time I've interacted with the devil.
Yeah.
He's like basically the most supporting, consistent, reliable character in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't make him a good being. It doesn't make the things he wants me to do or the dialogues I have with him like things I shouldn't be wary of. But what it does show is that he has my back. He is, and it's dark to talk about it, but it is my consistent experience that, and this is why I'm so wary of it, is that he encourages individuation. He encourages me to exert my sole sovereign rights and things like that. And now, I often describe God and the devil as two puppeteers, and in the middle is, or like two angry children fighting over a toy.
Oh, okay.
And in the middle is another child that they think is the toy, and that's humanity. You know, and whether I think it's right or wrong, that's my real experience of it.
No,
It might not resonate with you, but that's my real.
Yeah, no, I can see where you're coming from there. I mean, again, you're looking at what we like to call in the industry a grey area. Yeah. A few clients will, if any of you guys are watching who've been to me, you'll know what I mean when I say grey area. Okay, when we say grey area, you know, because you know most people say don't talk about religion or politics a lot of the time, but actually in this instance we do need to talk about that, because if you do look at the whole thing with the God and the devil figures, yeah, in one weird sort of way you can use almost like a puppet master sort of dynamic relationship going on there. However, to put another slant into the mix, and this is where the grey area comes in.
Sure.
There are talks about free will, but if we then revert it back to the actions that we have, so to speak, that we can make, coming back to the whole concept of we can make where we are now a heaven or a hell. Yeah. Those two that you describe, yes, they are a constant. They are a constant there, and yet if we're not careful, there is this puppet master thing going on, especially if we are not checking in with ourselves a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So the aspect you're describing there of the devil being a constant for you, it makes a lot of sense, because you've been to the dark side, and you're
unfortunately too long.
Yeah. But the fact is, he may not make you do those things.
No. I'm under no illusions.
There you go.
It's a silver tongue that is profoundly empowering in when. How can I explain it? So my theory in regards to what you're saying with this polarity is that what defines it as heaven or hell is aversion. The idea that, so my explicit knowledge of this reality is that, like you said, it's a hell, but that my own experiences, as you said, they're either a gift or something else, but I choose, with the only thing I think we can choose is to be adverse or accepting of those experiences. So if I live in a constant state of like, oh, this is hell, that's bad, I need to escape, I'll never progress. I'll always be tortured by it, and it always will be hell. Whereas if I accept what it is, accept where I am, accept my perceptions, that's when, and I'll come back to this because I call it psychic versus psychotic.
Yeah.
So psychotic is mentally ill and resisting any of the things I see as valid or real, and that's when I'm the most tortured. That's when it's the most like hell.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm not adverse to it and I accept what it is, it starts to become a blissful, unified, peaceful space.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I even think in Christian parlance, like, I hate referencing the Bible, but I'm gonna, like, and it's a lot of pop culture references this as well, like things like Dante's Inferno and Divine Comedy, and
of course,
and the Sandman comics and the kind of
the Sandman
that's
comics,
so cool, and the Lucifer spin-off as well.
Excuse
I love
me,
the
thank
series.
you, me
Yes,
too. Yes. Give me a bit of Tom Hardy any day, thank you.
Yeah, just like redemption basically, and the idea that like, just the idea that if you don't resist this space, it's just a realm of existence. And I initially felt like I was damned, and then in my sort of hallucinations, my psychic experiences, I was forgiven, and to be forgiven, I had to accept what had happened.
Yes.
I had to accept, because I experienced death around 12 or 13 years ago. I experienced that I died, and that I went to hell, and that was the end of any existence that happened before that moment. Just seemed like a black and white dream.
Yeah.
It was as though nothing had been real until that moment.
Yeah.
And it was terrifying, but it was also the beginning of like an amazing journey of self-actualization.
Yeah, and there you have the exact pinnacle, and I get this a lot as well. In fact, my mother, she and I it's just triggered something actually. What you've just said there, the outer body experience, or the being close to death. I mean, my mother and I very nearly died in childbirth. Strangely enough, yeah, I very nearly died with her.
Oh wow!
And she actually had a few out-of-body experiences, not just then, but she also had one where she had a car crash at the age of 16.
Oh wow!
She had an out-of-body experience then as well, and she said exactly the same thing. You know, it is that whole thing of comfort, acceptance, forgiving, and going towards the light in many ways. But it wasn't her time.
Yeah.
So,
well,
you know,
I could. Again, it's not
same
entirely
thing.
pleasant, but my experience of death was that. Because I'm perfectly happy talking about this on camera because it's on my other channel as well.
Of course, yeah.
I made a suicide attempt using SSRIs, so antidepressants. And my experience was that as my body was starting to shut down into a kind of drug-induced coma, I guess you would say.
Right, yeah.
Which didn't last that long in the grand scheme of things. But anyway, blah, blah, blah. My experience was that I descended into a black void, of utter nothingness. And what brought me back was demonic voices screaming my name, David. And I hadn't called myself by my first name for around 10 years or something. Everyone knew me as my surname, it was Brad or Bradley. And what saved me was these demons. They brought me back from death, and it was so terrifying that it woke me up in this world. And that was my experience. It began there with that moment of falling into nothingness, and for the brief second I felt like I was in that nothingness, there was just annihilation. There was no suffering, there was nothing. I didn't exist, but then these voices appeared out of the darkness and brought me back into this place. Yeah. And that for me was a very compelling reason to believe for a long time that I had died.
Yeah. Now that in itself I have heard described quite a few times as well.
Yeah.
And I do have a thought on this. I mean, there are others who have slightly different perspectives here, but again, this is only a personal point of view here. But that void that you describe, it's very much to do with the forgiveness and acceptance, especially if you have been on a path of darkness for quite some time. Now, it's not necessarily death in itself,
No.
but it is actually, believe it or not, a form of out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
It's what we call the plunge.
Ah, okay.
So the plunge, as far as I'm aware, and it happens in dreams sometimes,
Yeah.
if you are in a situation where you're feeling really vulnerable, really low, on the edge of suicide, you do find yourself plunging or spiraling into something else. And for myself, that is actually a mixture of the two worlds. That's one of the many times, but one of the more significant times, where psychic and psychology worlds overlap each other. The demons that you heard, thank you, I'm just getting some insight. So, do you mind if I allow my guides in on this one? Okay, so the demons that you expressed, or experienced, I should say, expressed. I do what's called a malaprop sometimes. I come out with the wrong word when I need to say another one.
I know that.
Oh, good, that's right.
Yeah,
But just in case
malapropism.
these guys don't know out here what I've just done there. But anyway, so basically, the demons that you heard saying your name, they have a dual role. So you've got your bad demons. Those are the ones that you've been tapping into for quite a long time. The other side, thank you. The other side are what we call the angelic demons. Now, I know that sounds really strange.
No, I'm utterly engrossed. Please go on.
Okay, so this is only from what I can gather here. The angelic demons are there to play an interesting role. They come across as demonic, but actually they're there to basically go, no, you're coming back.
Yeah.
Now, this is the only time I will ever say scare tactics of the mind. That's the only time I will ever say scare tactics are vital in this
Well,
instance.
it saved my life.
Yeah, in this
It
instance.
brought me back from annihilation. So.
Yeah, what you experienced was a double-jointed sword here. You had the demons who were prepared to pull you in like this. I've literally got a claw thing going on here.
Yeah.
I've got one side going, David, come to us, like this. The other side going, David, this is what's going to happen.
Fuck me.
Wake up.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, David!
Yeah.
Like, it's like, almost like a screech, is that right?
Yeah, very high pitched.
Da-da-da,
It was dual voices from either side of reality.
Jewel, yes, there you go.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you experienced.
Pretty much.
You got the demonic, angel demonic.
Yeah.
But the ones who basically want you to go, oi, 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 the ones that are almost going like that, they're the ones going, don't you dare go down that path. You do that, we're going to get you.
Yeah.
Yeah? But rather than appearing as angels, per se, they'll appear as almost like a shapeshifter. It sounds like a shapeshifter scenario, where they'll appear as demons because it's what you know. And that's where psychology
It's also
comes in.
effective as well. Like it's in terms of like an angelic being would have drawn me in to that annihilation, whereas the demonic one scared me out of it. So that's how I'm relating to what you're saying. Like it was actually it would be required, I guess. It would need to be terrifying to stop me going into what was actually a release for someone who was suffering really badly.
Yeah.
So I can relate to what you're saying, and I think it makes sense.
Yeah, but rather than looking at it as an angelic to draw you in, it's actually something darker.
Yeah.
I'll be very honest with you.
Well, it was my own will to destruction.
Yeah.
It was being taken advantage of.
Yeah, which is where those guys will come in.
It plays into why I voluntarily use the term schizophrenic as well, is because it's like it's just easier than facing my actual responsibility, I guess. Because there's also
Easy?
risk involved, because I know I wasn't sane, I wasn't rational because of Because to me, like when I went into that space of annihilation and then brought back from it, there was an enormous power came back with me. And I don't think that was a negative thing. I think it was literally the like in my direct experience, it was the death of one aspect of myself. Some part of me did genuinely die.
Yeah.
And what remains is a consciousness or a mind that is alien to this world. And it was always within me. Because my memories of before I died, there was a strong sense that there was a joke that everyone else was in on. Everyone knew something I didn't. They navigated reality in a certain way that I never could. And now the joke has been revealed. And now everyone else is the one that doesn't really see the forces at work. And I realised that I was interacting with characters beyond the normal consciousness of most people.
Yeah.
Similar to your guides, you know, there was this sense that like I was being guided to a point, and I am very much a strong believer in fate and predeterminism. The idea that that was meant to happen to me. It birthed. It was a baptism of fire. It's in the book I'm writing at the moment. I've got 12 chapters outlined that I'm working on.
Oh yes.
And I call it my baptism of fire. It was where that experience of death eradicated anything of me that was weak or false or unnecessary or unreal, and it awoke me to a new stage of consciousness.
A psychic shedding, we call it.
Yeah.
That's
wow, okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
we call that a psychic shedding.
And I genuinely believe that death was necessary for me to reach my maximum potential, and a big part of why I want to do this is to explore that, you know. Okay, so this is the part 2 and the sort of roundup of our conversation, which I wanted to frame with asking you a series of pre-prepared questions.
Oh, I
that
say.
I prepared.
Go for it, David. Go for it.
And so then some of them will be slightly redundant now because of the dialogue we've already had.
Yeah.
But the first one I wanted to ask is like, how do you personally experience psychic phenomena? What is your direct experience of especially the ones we've covered, things like, because that's why I said it might be slightly redundant.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I say, it varies every time. I mean, it's like I said in the first half. Basically, I'm a clairsentient. So I work very, very strongly with picking up sensations of activity, energy changes, emotional changes, and that's the empath side coming out a lot. Particularly, I work with, essentially, unless I get a strong, strong connection as to who I'm working with opposite me, then it determines how strong the spirit link is. Okay. So it can be in the form of just messages to pass on. It can also be in the form of if the content or the connection is really, really strong, it can be a very strong sense of the energies tell me what this person's like. And sometimes I'll get the odd whiff, again, like I said in the first half, of perfume, of tobacco, of whether this person loved a certain taste even. Sometimes doesn't happen very often, but sometimes I'll get the odd taste of something that they used to eat.
I have had a similar thing. Yeah, it's just spontaneous flavour when you. I know what you mean.
It's a bit of a strange one, but but from my past experiences on ghost hunts and. Well, I say ghost hunts. Adrian, whom I was talking about in the last one, he would have killed me for using that term. Yeah. Paranormal investigation. Sorry, Adrian. Okay. Sorry, Adrian. But yeah, on paranormal investigations, as a medium in particular, you do get to witness quite a lot of strange activity, shall we say. And this is where my clairsentience really does come in, because if I'm in a certain part of the building, I'll notice an abrupt change in temperature. I'll either feel really uncomfortable, like somebody say, "Don't you dare go there," or "Oh no, come to us," or "Help me." I've actually had a child that I've had to help pass on before, a 10-year-old who was trapped. Trapped where she was at the time. And this is going back a couple of years now. About 2 or 3 years ago I experienced this. It was so sad. I just kept picking up this little child of about 10 years old, and she just kept wandering the place. but she was scared of somebody. She was actually really scared. It could potentially have been the person who actually murdered her
Whoa.
as well, because he was actually lingering. And I remember Adrian and I actually helping her to pass on to the other side because she was petrified.
Wow, yeah.
I've had to
I
actually...
imagine that would be holding her in place, that
Yeah.
fear in itself.
That's right.
Yeah.
And when you get a connection like that, that's when the messages really do come in strong. And that's when you do slowly, via meditation or a visualization, you guide that girl, you guide that, not the bird, but not the bird exactly squawking there in the background, but you guide the spirit towards the light. And that's what I used to do with Adrian. I don't do that so much now, but I'd be
I imagine that's quite
open to that.
quite difficult work to kind of sustain, because it must be quite harrowing.
It can be, yeah, especially as you were talking about demonic sort of energy.
Yeah.
I've had to deal with that myself as well.
Yeah.
Because now I do remember this.
The interesting thing with demonic energy, quickly before you go on,
Yeah.
is it tends to thrive on fear, and if you're not afraid, you have a completely different relationship with it.
Yes, and that's what I want to focus on a bit here as
Yeah.
well. I remember actually dealing with a demonic energy myself, and I know that's not my speciality field myself after that one experience, but if there's a demon around, I'll either pass that on to the person that I'm working with if they're experienced in that field or whatever. But I remember working with somebody called Daniel at the time, this is going back years ago,
Okay.
in the Galleries of Justice of Nottingham.
Ah, okay, that's cool.
And Daniel was actually a demonologist, so he knew everything there was to know about demon activity.
I didn't know that was a field.
It
That's
is-
fascinating.
it
Okay,
is
do go
actually
on.
a field,
Yeah,
yes.
I think I'd probably be pretty good at that.
I think you would be, actually. If you want to, if I look up the name, I'll put you in his direction. He'll
That'd
be
be cool.
able to tell you some more details
Yeah,
about that.
yeah.
But I remember working with him. Now this is the weird thing. At the
Yeah.
time when I was working with him,
Yeah.
I wasn't even in a capacity as a medium.
Yeah.
I was just a walk around character for this company,
Yeah.
right? But I got drawn into this whole thing with the medium side of things, and he kept saying to me, "You are a medium. You are," and I was at the time I was denying and denying and
Yeah,
denying. No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
It's
no,
funny
I'm not.
as well when you meet someone there's no question, and I've had this like when my partner was pregnant with my son. I had 3 or 4 separate people who I just bumped into randomly in bars or in town or whatever, and they're like, and I'm like, oh, I'm having a son, and they're like, it's a boy. No, not having a son, sorry, I'm having a child, and they're like,
Yeah.
it's a boy, just deadpan, it's a boy, and like, there was also, oh yeah, it's just like everyone, yeah, I'll come into that in a bit perhaps, but did I tell you I had a premonition
No.
of a dream where I had a 15-year-old son, and this was before we knew she was pregnant. It
Yeah.
would have been like 3 weeks into the pregnancy,
Yeah.
so there would have been at best a pheromonal signature that suggesting she was pregnant.
Yeah.
But other than that, anyway, the point was, I had this random, incredibly hyper-vivid dream that I had a son. He was about 15, 18 years old.
Yeah.
And I showed him, there was this, it was like an interstellar whale that came out of space-time. I was just floating in space with this kid, with this like 18-year-old, and then it opened up into this like sort of like cryo chamber,
Oh, you know.
which represented the womb, I assume. And then they went through this whole thing where, and I brought him out of what, to my mind, was an underworld, like Hades, sort
Yeah.
of like a place where there was millions of people there, and he had loads of friends. They all knew what was going on. But I invited him into this reality, basically, and it's not like a hell like Christian hell, but like an underworld of just like
that's
just
another
millions
territory
of people.
right there.
Yeah. That's a whole other realm. And the last thing that happened in that dream was he went into there was these 2 pillars, and there was green static electrical energy, and it was a doorway, and he disintegrated into that, and everyone was begging him to stay, please don't go, we're going to miss you so much, and so on and so forth. And and then it turned out within like another 3 weeks we found out we were having a child, and he was a boy in the dream. Like, so I already kind of had an inkling it might be a boy, and then we found out it was a boy. And he definitely demonstrates. I don't know whether I'm just imagining this, but I'm pretty convinced that if I have a gift, he has a gift as well.
Yeah.
And it's pretty if you get to meet him, it would be pretty evident.
I hope I do.
What was the point of me saying this anyway?
No, but it was to do with even I've gone off track here, but no, I do. No, it was to do with the whole thing with demonology.
Yes,
that was
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Daniel will tell you exactly the same thing. That when
Daniel
you're
is
dealing.
incidentally the name that my voices call me.
Oh really, Daniel?
Yeah, or Dan, specifically Dan.
Oh okay.
Yeah, that it's. I think it's to do with the Book of Dan. It's the closest equivalent I can find, which is this Mastery over Demons.
Yeah.
But they've called me Dan for years, much to my endless annoyance, and I finally managed to get them to revert to calling me David again.
Yeah, it's because of the
Through
biblical
just, like,
connotation.
Yeah,
That's why. Yeah,
I
that
think
I
it's
do
something
know.
in my subconscious they know that'll trigger, but like they're always like Dan, and I was like, oh for fuck's sake, what now? Kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
like, right, you want me on that level?
Yeah,
Okay,
Daniel,
right.
Daniel.
Yeah.
Well, you're lucky they didn't call you Damien. That's a totally different level.
We were going to call my son Damien actually.
Oh!
We thought wiser of it. He's called Mace now.
Oh, Mace, nice. That's good. I like that.
But yeah, because I really want to. Yeah, fuck it, we're going. One of my primary things is that when I enter into the vivid hell, I am the devil in that state.
Yeah.
And then when I'm in heaven, I am the Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And I have these transcendent identities that exist when my personality is stripped away. I have what's called a transcendent identity that
Yes.
I've built a kind of a way to navigate a certain reality. And I've had some incredible visions of
I can imagine.
like basically the army of hell at my command, and I used it to destroy hell and heaven in my visionary state. Now, it
Right.
doesn't mean that necessarily applied to anything in the spirit world, but to me that was an enormously revelatory process, because then I disarmed the whole army. I disbanded the whole army, but I still feel like when I'm so like I quite often battle demons. It's quite a common experience for me, especially when I'm on the verge of sleep. Like I've killed apparitions that in the form of angels, demons, golems, trolls. My favourite experience that was like something out of a science fiction film or like a fantasy film was using this staff made of ice to destroy a fire golem in this like Colosseum thing. Yeah. And it was incredibly visceral and real. But there was a point to this. Anyway, sorry, demonology.
Yeah.
That was the point.
Yes, that was it. I mean, yeah, and again, what you described there, Daniel will tell you, I mean, certainly when I worked with him, because I was fledgling and denying everything possible because I was petrified of the whole thing.
Reasonably so, I think.
Yeah. And unbeknown to me, I was actually being prepared, so to speak, to open up. And oh, what a wonderful way to get confirmation of that, then actually be attacked by a demon myself. Now,
Was this
was actually
in real space you saw this, or in space,
sensation energy? Because when we did the vigil, whenever you do a vigil on a paranormal investigation, you are in darkness, because that's when everything comes out.
Sure,
when everything properly comes out.
Yeah, that's fine.
And being a fledgling medium at the time, I was just focusing on the readings. I didn't think I was a medium. Oh well, okay. On camera, I will say, yes, I knew I kind of knew at the time I was a medium, but I didn't want anything to do with that. I very nearly I very nearly went the same route as my mum's side of the family, being so scared of the gift that I just viewed it as a curse.
Yeah.
So I remember this thing, whatever it was a form of demon, but it was also because it was a prison that we were in, it was actually a prisoner. And this guy, I'm not joking you, with force, I felt like I was being strangled.
Like garroted.
Like here, around my neck, like that. But the strength of it was not human. It was something else.
Yeah.
And I just could not breathe
Yeah.
whatsoever. Luckily, Daniel got hold of me,
Mm.
and whatever he did, because obviously I didn't know how to ground myself at the time, but he basically told this thing or whatever it is to fuck off
Yeah.
in the nicest term possible.
Yeah.
But he made sure everything was closed. I didn't know what he was doing at the time, but he had me in a clinch like that.
Yeah.
But whatever he did,
Did he sort of strip it away as he pulled away from the clinch?
not kind of. No.
Okay.
It was
I was
just a
just
normal.
curious.
It was just a normal hug.
Yeah.
But where he placed, hang on, if I turn around to the camera, basically where he'd hugged me, he deliberately placed one hand just here,
Yeah.
right? Now, that I've come to know as part of my entrance, so to speak, for spirit. That is kind of basically here.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of mid. Hang on, again, if I turn to the camera. This area here is where I get the most contact from spirit.
Mhm.
Through the back. And that's where he was kind of putting the hand. But I don't know what happened. He just placed it. He didn't do anything. He just placed it there.
Yeah.
And it was like everything was not stripped, but it melted away.
Yeah.
I felt safe. That I came to know as a form of grounding.
Yeah.
Or cut off.
Yeah.
I've come to know
Mine
as the
is,
cut off. Like that.
Mine is here. I even use it in the street, just a block method, but mine is centred right in the sort of lower Tantien, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
In Darien.
Yeah, in
And my left foot as well, actually.
Oh,
Well, that's not something I'm
okay.
comfortable talking about, but yeah, I can bring in on one side, because I have this kind of thing that I sort of programmed into myself, that you give with this hand, you receive with this hand.
Yeah. Give, take.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I
it's
have it
kind
on inverted, so this is my giving,
Ah, yeah.
and that's my receiving.
Ah, yes.
And I've got, like, through my hallucinations over time, I'm like, okay, I obviously need to learn how to control this, because and being able to control my energy has given me a greater sense of confidence, so it's been useful in that regard. But yeah, it's sort of like I do a lot of chi work and energy balls and
yes.
basic Reiki and anyway.
You definitely need Cassie.
Yeah,
You know
I was
Cassie
quite
Hardy.
intrigued. Yeah.
Yeah. So Cassie, if you're listening, Reiki over here.
Yes, please. So I did actually have a Reiki healing done once by an old landlord, and I think that was what caused that to be that point.
Yeah.
Incidentally, which is weird. That's just thought has just occurred to me. But yeah, she did a grounding and she hovered right over there, and I think that is where I most connect. I think it's like the sacral.
Yeah.
But at that point, that's where most of my energy comes from.
Yeah, from there.
And I ground it in there as well, in the cauldron sort of thing, and all these kind of.
Yeah. For me, it's here.
Yeah.
For me, it's here and here. That's where I mostly operate.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that's kind of partial. I mean, there's loads more I could talk about, but I mean, obviously, I don't know how good we are for time. But yeah, those are the main sort of things that sort of sum up my psychic experiences in that respect.
So the next question I had in mind, we've already covered that one, so let's move on. So this is quite one I'm very intrigued by, because, like, you know, I mentioned at the start how it's like medical services don't teach you how to master psychic phenomena.
Yeah,
basically.
that's right.
So what practices have helped you refine your process is the question.
Good question.
Because I'm all ears on this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So for me, now I've really got to really think about this, because depending on which area you're focusing on,
Okay.
the initial way that I found for defining the practices that I do have.
Refining, like making them more effective.
Oh, refining. Oh, I
Yeah.
see. I do apologise.
That's right.
But defining does come into it in a way, because a lot of it for me has been trial and error, because nobody in my family could teach me what they'd been passed on, because they were too scared of it.
Sure.
So a lot of it I've had to learn the hard way myself, right?
I relate, yeah.
But over time, if we're talking refining, as part of that defining, it's actually been thanks to my coaching qualification, strangely enough.
Okay. And what is that roughly, just for the reference?
Okay, so for the coaching, the life coaching, it's a slightly different approach to readings. Say, for instance, if I had a client who wanted to make some changes in their lives, they could do one of two things. They can either have a guidance being told via a reading, so to speak, but it has to be, be let known to them, unless, of course, they're used to me, that it is a guide, mostly. Yeah. But coaching, on the other side of the things, you could get somebody who needs guidance, but they don't necessarily want a reading.
Yeah.
So coaching is an impartial way, as opposed to a reading, in which you do get personal.
Quite direct information.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Yeah.
But coaching is a way, it's a good discipline actually for me, because it's actually encouraged me to step back and actually go, okay, I'm here for the client. I think that's got to be the main refining. It's actually adding the coaching element onto it, because it's a different discipline. It allows you to step back and be more objective, and you're asking the questions, and if any advice is given, it's as a suggestion, and then the client is asked how they feel about that suggestion. And if so, what could they step upon to go forwards, that kind of thing. So in many ways, it's like giving a support system, but working with spirit in a different way.
Okay.
So some of it,
I guess you kind of are quite candid about the fact that that's how you're doing.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Yeah.
You can be, yeah. I mean, because, again, you could get a client who has had a reading before, but not coaching. So I have to make that distinction clear. So in this instance, I'd have to say to them, if I was coaching you, I would say, okay, so this is not a reading in which I'm spoon-feeding the information. This is where you have to discover the answers for yourself.
That's very much how I do my tarot as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I frame it sort of like this information, basically using synchronicity. The idea. So I put it that the meaning that you extract from the tarot reading is based on your experience, and you can only know. I can guide you and hint you in the right direction, but it's 99% of it even comes from your ability to make those connections, and to see that there, and that it's not up to me to tell you what that means. And it's more like your life coaching sort of approach.
Exactly. But you will get some who just
want to be told.
So in this instance, they don't need a coaching, they need a reading in this instance. But it still has to be made clear that it is a guide. And if it resonates, it resonates. Yeah. If they want more specific detail, then I would use something which I don't use very often, and that is the trance mediumship side of things. But I only use that for one or two very select clients, because that's the most draining out of all of them.
In my own experience of trance, it's enormously draining, because you have to be like, it's almost like your perspective is a rubber band over here, or like you're sat back, and that actually takes like a force of will to do that.
That's
to let
right.
it come out. Yeah, and it can be quite tiring.
And that's where the coaching element does come in, because it teaches you boundaries. And it teaches you a very mindful approach. So in holistic life coaching, we're also, which you could learn as well in terms of spiritual paths and readings, but what the holistic side does is it gives you some more tools to work with. It gives you more tools in using things like visualizations, meditations, working with herbs, working with sort of different oils, essential oils, and all sorts of different things.
Sage is an absolute favourite of mine. I regularly, what's the word? It begins with S. Clear the house, basically, using sage. I do it like a minimum every 6 months.
Yes.
And that is something that I didn't learn spontaneously. I was told to do that, but I find it very effective.
Yes, it is very good.
Sativa plant.
Smudging, it's called.
Smudging, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, I love smudging.
I use it so regularly. Like, if ever I've had someone in with just the house, like there was a guy that I don't even like to think the name of because he was so unpleasant, but I smudged the house.
Yeah.
And I used like basically a weird incantation to clear the house, and it's been good since then. But I use a kind of Christian auto-channeled kind of process. So there's a certain way of phrasing the language. There's a certain thought process goes on. A certain connection with the figure of Christ that I use as an invocation and a protection of the house. I've never admitted that to anyone except my partner, so it's interesting that that's going to be on this.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah,
I popped your cherry.
Indeed. So, because I'm abundantly aware of how much time we've got left, you've kind of covered the next question, which is what kind of services you can provide people with.
Oh, there's
Although if you
all
wanted to
sorts.
cover a little bit more of
Oh,
that.
absolutely. I can add all sorts. I mean, obviously, you've heard quite a bit on the coaching side of things. In terms of the reading side of things, I use whatever method I use mediumship as something that complements everything, just to give a more sensitive and detailed approach. Depending on the client, I could go as hard or as gentle as you like. I think that's what sets me above a few people. I work with each client, and that's what coaching does teach you, because, I mean, every client is different.
Sure.
So you may get somebody who's just purely into tarot readings. I do tarot readings as well. I do oracle card readings.
What's oracle card reading?
Basically, it's a gentler form of tarot. So all that's doing, it's working with divine messages that are on the cards, so say. So it doesn't even have to be a divine message. It could be just a simple image which provides insight from a spiritual aspect. Tarot is more balanced because it encompasses both worlds, whether harsh or not.
That's why I like the Rider-Waite deck. I think I mentioned before we filmed, that's why I chose that deck specifically as well.
That's
because it doesn't just go, everything's going to be sunny and roses and perfect forever. It's like, it's quite well balanced.
It is extremely well balanced. And again, I use various decks as well. In fact, every Halloween I do cleanse new decks ready to use for the next cycle.
That's
basically.
Cool.
So
Beltane or Samhain?
Samhain.
No, I don't pronounce it correctly, but I mean the right one, Samhain.
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 I mean, Beltane, which is coming up, you can cleanse tools, but that has a different energy. It's more light. Whereas with Samhain, it's more like it's like an ending of one cycle, communicating with the past, ready to go and move on. And if you're working with lighter sort of energy and you connect more with angels, I do angel tarot card readings, especially the Doreen Virtue Archangel Power Tarot.
I've heard of Doreen Virtue.
Now that's a different story. I'm not going to go into it on this broadcast, but I know she's undergoing a few changes spiritually herself and has upset a few people along the way. So I'm not going to go too much into that.
Avert our eyes from that subject.
But I'm not going to go into detail about that too much because it's still sensitive to some people.
Sure.
But I love her Archangel Power Tarot because it comes from a place A of balance, B of angelic insight, and B of the spiritual insight of the oracle cards. So I love it for the triple purpose that it's got. It's really, really good. I also use a term that we like to use as scrying, which in this instance is looking into something like a crystal ball, which I personally like to use. Others like to use water as a way of scrying to see into the future. That's the stereotypical, if the crystal ball's always been the stereotypical sort of thing. Some people adore...
It's a focal point.
Exactly it. All the tools that I use are
I
merely
use
focal points.
candlelight usually.
That's another form there, candles.
Yeah.
Occasionally I'll use candles, but my speciality is more crystal ball for scrying. I also use psychometry, which is reading energies off objects.
Yeah, that's something that I do as applied to everything. That's just a normal part of my existence. The psychometry kind of thing.
Fantastic.
I get it with especially something like an instrument, a musical instrument, where someone's poured a huge part of their self
life
and the not just energy, but like it has a voice. Like an instrument has a voice, and you can feel it on the instrument. And like when one person plays that instrument, it kind of can tarnish it, and they gather over time a kind of a soul or an entity to themselves, the instrument, which I find really interesting.
Yeah.
And the same with objects. But,
it is. It's great. I mean, I get the same if I'm in an old building. I feel sometimes I have the need to touch, especially in a church. I'll touch something like one of the pews, say for instance.
And you just find yourself doing it accidentally.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, and then you're
it's
like, oh, wait a minute.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Hello. You know.
Or
jewellery.
It's nice how much of this is.
Yeah, jewellery's another one I love doing.
Yeah.
Or watch, or I've even read a mobile phone before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just reading the energies off the mobile phone.
I get that as well, actually.
Oh, okay, cool.
I have to say, I'll say that I said to you earlier, but when we stopped filming, but it is really a pleasure to have some of these things like said back to me without me having to prompt you, because it's like, yes, someone gets this. Do you know what I mean? It's really nice.
Thank you, and it's lovely speaking to somebody like this as well. Because I mean, I will say this: I really wish I had somebody like you when I'd started on my spiritual journey.
Yeah.
But you know, the payback for that, though, I have to say, because I believe very strongly in give and take. You know, you've given me an opportunity to speak on this podcast, and it gives me a chance to give back, so to speak. So if there is anybody out there who's unsure, then I hope this podcast and visual broadcast as well will help in this instance. And another thing I use as well, talking of giving back, so to speak, I use palmistry as well, and so those are my kind of specialities.
The tools of the trade.
My tools, and I also use coaching in a psychic sense as well. But if there's somebody who is not really into the whole reading side of things, then but wants an alternative sort of approach, holistic life coaching I do as well.
Cool. Yeah. So that leads on to the very last question I had, which is where can people contact you? I'll leave obviously in the bottom of the video. I'll put maybe links if you would like, but just if you tell the camera,
right?
How they
Okay.
can contact you.
So you can find me on my website, which is www.Sascha, that's SASCHA Cooper, COOPER. So Sascha Cooper, all one word, .co.uk. You can find out everything on there, including my prices and all the different things that I do, plus the coaching. There will be some more added to the site as well, including a mailing list, which I'm slowly getting around to creating. But if you can't wait that long and you want to see things as they develop, then I'm also on social media. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook under Sascha Cooper, Creative Entrepreneur and Holistic Insightful Life Coach, where I kind of put up everything that I'm doing on the work side of things up there. I'm also on Twitter. So my Twitter handle in this instance is Sascha Cooper 35, Sascha Cooper 35, and I'm also on Instagram, Sascha.Cooper35. That's the number 35, by the way, for both Twitter and Instagram. And I'm also on Pinterest under Sascha Cooper, Creative Entrepreneur and Holistic Insightful Life Coach as well. That is new, so that's still kind of being built up at the moment. But yeah, you can find all my details on my site and on social media. Drop me a message if you'd like to learn a bit more, or you want to book a coaching session or a reading session. We can either do it face-to-face. I do it normally at Pebble Beach in Brighton Marina, face-to-face. Usually on Wednesdays, Fridays and Sundays, unless of course something comes up and I have to change things around. At other times, I can also do at your convenience at the Brighton Therapy Centre on Princes Street in Brighton at a time that's convenient to you. I can also do online readings, and same thing with coaching as well. So, yeah, just contact me for further details.
Cool. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure.
And
to
you,
Thank
David.
you so much for coming along. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Cool. I think that's us out. So, if waves by the camera, I guess.
Bye-bye.
Cool.